Say hi, YouTubers.
Hi, YouTubers.
Hey, YouTubers. It's me and Max here to talk about the last few words that we're going to mention in Chapter 25, the consolidation of Latin America. We're going to talk about the Monroe Doctrine, manifest destiny, the Spanish-American War, and I'm going to say the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal. So those four words we're going to look at. So the United States found itself in an interesting position at the same time that Latin American countries were starting to get their independence. The United States had recently become independent in the late 1700s, and so as the dawn of the 19th century or the 18th century rolled around and these Latin American nations began to become independent, the United States found itself beginning to emerge as a world power and to engage in some imperialistic ambitions of her own, as well as attempting to assert control and influence on these new nations, these Latin American nations. So, the Monroe Doctrine was issued in the early 19th century by President James Monroe, the 1820s, when Monroe essentially said to European powers that there would be no more European meddling in the Americas, that essentially their ties had been cut and that they needed to stay in their own side of the world. And so the United States was essentially declaring themselves, where'd you go, Max? To be,
right here.
Oh, there you are. To be independent and to be able to have control over the Americas. So this took a great amount of gumption by the Americans to say that they were ready to take on this kind of responsibility, and they were backed up by the British in this, and quickly became kind of the monitors of the American world. So the United States wanted to make sure that the development of these new nations fit under what the United States' interests would be. And the United States kind of took advantage of the newly forming nations and asserted influence over them because they were in the unique position of being the first independent nation in the Americas, and so they kind of acted as a model and a guide for the rest. The second word was manifest destiny. So manifest destiny was the idea that the United States had a destiny to expand and become a great nation, stretching from sea to shining sea, and they had achieved this through a number of strategical moves in the 1800s in order to move from strictly East Coast colonies all the way into the Midwest and then across the Rocky Mountains and into what would later become California, Oregon, Washington territory. So the United States negotiated, purchased land in the Louisiana Purchase, explored this land, moved westward, and also battled with Mexico for land which used to be Texas. So here comes the United States basically grabbing as much land as they possibly could, and the western portion of the United States is largely the size that it is because of their negotiations with other areas. So Mexico lost an awful lot of land during this time to the United States. There you go. And so this manifest destiny kind of controlled Americans' minds and allowed them to feel like they were owed all of this land. You okay? And so acquisitions that they gained from Mexico during this time included all the parts of Mexico, northern Mexico, which would later become Texas, New Mexico, Colorado, Arizona, and California. So they gained this land at the expense of the Latin American countries. Now, the next two words were the Spanish-American War and the Panama Canal. Now, these are two of the United States of America's most important moves in securing their position as kind of the ones who control or imperialize Latin America. The Spanish-American War was in Cuba. Cuba was one of the last big colonies of Spain, and it was also really close to the United States. So the United States realized that Spain having control of Cuba was incredibly beneficial. So they helped the Cubans essentially gain independence from Spain in the Spanish-American War. And they sent troops to help fight in Cuba and free Cuba from Spanish rule. In the process, they also gained Guam, Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and were able to kind of also control Cuban government for a very long time, and that's where we also get Guantanamo Bay. That's where we got that from, is the Spanish-American War. And so the United States is popping up as a major world power, and becomes kind of an aggressor as well. In addition, the United States had an interest in securing, under Teddy Roosevelt, who was also involved in the Spanish-American War, Teddy Roosevelt wanted to see a Panama Canal, a canal which would cut through the Isthmus of Panama, which was that thin bit of land. And so the United States urged the Panamanians to rebel against Colombia and become an independent nation of Panama. And in return, the United States, for helping them, Panama would essentially give the United States access to the Panama Canal, which was financed and dug by Americans and American engineers. And so the Panama Canal came to be in the hands of the United States and benefited global trade, and also economically benefited the United States. So the United States was kind of having their way with Latin America up until this point, up until the 1900s, and has remained a major factor in Latin American issues, especially economically. The United States poured a lot of money financially into Latin America and has a lot of foreign investments in Latin America, more than anywhere else in the world. By 1914, almost half of the United States foreign investment was in Latin America. So they became a very powerful force in Latin America. Okay, me and Max are going to say goodbye. We're going to sign off for this last video of the unit, chapter, and we'll come at you again.
Chapter number 6.
Chapter number 6. I think it's chapter 25.
No, it's chapter number 6.
He knows more than me. I don't even argue anymore, so. All right, Max, can you tell the YouTubers to be awesome?
Yeah. Bye-bye, YouTubers. Have fun and be awesome.
That's right.